Our psychology experiment is on the bystander effect. What is the bystander effect, you may ask? Well, have you been a victim of the bystander effect unknowingly? Well, let's check and see. If you were one of those witnesses that just kept walking, then you were a victim of the bystander effect. Or, if you were one of those witnesses that didn't stop the thief from rummaging through the purse, then you were also a victim of the bystander effect.
On a more serious note, the bystander effect is a psychological theory that attempts to explain why, when people are in a crowd or a large group of people, they are usually not willing to go out of their way to help a stranger in need. Explaining the bystander effect, psychologists from Princeton and Leah University state, a person who faces a situation of another person in distress, but does so with the knowledge that others are also present and available to respond, is slower and less likely to respond to the person in distress than is a person who knows that he or she is the only one who is aware of the distress. The bystander effect is a generalized psychological phenomenon because of a diffusion of responsibility that happens when a person is in a large group of people. If an individual is in a crowd of people, that individual is less likely to help a person in need than if that individual was alone with the person in need because he or she feels less responsibility with the other people around. Commenting on the diffusion of responsibilities, the psychologists from Princeton and Leah University state, diffusion of responsibility accounts reflect the notion that as the number of people present in a situation increases, each individual feels less compelled or responsible to help. Another psychological theory, the confusion of responsibility, holds that people who are willing to help a person in need often hold back their generosity because they do not want others to think that they were the one who caused the harm in the first place. Along with diffusion and confusion of responsibility, social influence also plays a role because an individual in a crowd would be less likely to help someone in need if no one around him is offering any help to that person.
A lot of researchers have questioned why people remain bystanders instead of intervening and helping their fellow man or woman. Through their research, it is said that many people feel a sense of social pressures and group norms occurring, especially in crowds, causing the bystander effect.
In 2011, Peter Fisher and his colleagues had produced a massive amount of data from studying the bystander effect. From all of the research done by Fisher, he seemed to have evidence that when a group of people are witnessing something, they are looking for cues from one another as whether to act or not, which often resulted in no action at all. Fisher found that the reason for this no-action obstacle is due to the issue of responsibility. Bystanders often assume someone else will intervene and take responsibility, so because of this, they feel less responsible to take action.
Bibb Latane performed an experiment in which college students in a waiting room heard a tape recording that simulated the sounds of a woman climbing on a chair to reach some papers. The woman fell and was calling out for help. Latane found that people were more inclined to help if they were alone, but when surrounded by others in the waiting room, people were less inclined to help the woman. You may wonder why people feel less responsible to intervene in a situation where there is more than one person, compared to when someone is alone. Researchers have explained this idea by the diffusion of responsibility. When witnesses to an emergency see witnesses other than themselves, they assume someone else will help and therefore become a bystander. The witness shifts responsibility from themselves to others that happen to be around the situation.
Researchers Starley and Latane have also explained the bystander effect through confusion of responsibility. Bystanders fail to help someone in distress because they don't want to be mistaken for the cause of that distress. They also suspected that bystanders fail to intervene in an emergency because of the reactions of others around them. To test this hypothesis, they ran an experiment in which participants were filling out questionnaires in a room, and while working on the form, smoke started filtering into the room. When participants were alone, 75% of them left the room and reported the smoke. When 3 participants were in the room, only 38% left to report the smoke. When a participant was joined by 2 people that were instructed not to show any emotion or concern, only 10% of the participants reported the smoke.
The passive bystanders in this study succumb to what is known as pluralistic ignorance, which is the tendency to mistake one another's calm demeanor as a sign that no emergency is actually taking place. The researchers explain this with saying that there are certain social norms that reinforce pluralistic ignorance. When a witness does not respond to an emergency in a public place and others see this happening, it is against the social norm to be that one person that intervenes when no one else is doing anything to help. Some other research has shown that people are more likely to help those they perceive to be similar to them, including others from their own racial or ethnic groups. In general, researchers found that women tend to receive more help when in a crisis than men, but this has been said to vary according to appearance. More attractive and femininely dressed women tend to receive more help from someone passing by because they fit the stereotype of a vulnerable female.
We decided to act out examples of the bystander effect.
Person in distress.
Help! Help! Anyone?
The witnesses can hear the victim's call for help, but they choose to ignore it.
Help! 911! Help! I can't feel my leg!
Why does this happen? Well, it all revolves around responsibility, specifically, diffusion of responsibility. If there are more bystanders around, the witnesses don't feel as obliged to help the person in distress. They assume that someone else around will help. But now, let's take a look at what happens when there's only one bystander put in this scenario, rather than many.
Yeah, I'll be right there! Yo, help!
Person in distress.
Anyone? I think I broke my leg!
There's now only one bystander in the scenario.
Oh, do you need help?
Yes!
Now that there's only one witness, she feels responsible and obliged to help the person in distress.
You call 911?
Yeah, I'll call 911. I got it.
And here's another example of the bystander effect. Here are a couple of strangers that are working diligently on their psychology homework. What happens if one of them needs to use the restroom quickly? She leaves her belongings unattended for only a couple of minutes. The two bystanders are not doing anything about the situation because they don't feel responsible for the bag the stranger left. Because the two bystanders did not feel obliged to take care of the stranger's belongings, the stranger was robbed in plain sight. But now, let's take a look at what happens when the bystanders feel responsible for the stranger's belongings.
Can you just watch my bag? I'm going to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
In this scenario, the responsibility to watch the bag was delegated to one of the bystanders explicitly. Let's see what happens when the thief tries to rummage through the bag now.
Hey, is that yours?
No.
Just a simple request from strangers to watch over their stuff will change all the dynamics to a particular scenario. If the bystanders feel obligated to watch over a person's belongings, they'll do it, but they have to be told to from the beginning.
As you know by now, we have most likely all been victims of the bystander effect. Or maybe you have been on the other side of the effect, where no one has stopped to help you in a certain situation. Either way, we must move forward to prevent the bystander effect from happening so often. One approach to decreasing the number of bystanders out there is to inform and educate the public of what is going on. Also, by intervening, one sets an example for others to do the same. Schools have started addressing the issue of the bystander effect in the classroom because they have found it especially prevalent in bullying. While informing students on this issue, bystander activism is becoming more widely known. Active bystanders tend to feel responsible towards other people's well-being, and through this commitment to actively intervene and help others, they can work to eliminate the bystander effect.